Welcome back, everyone. CFB Paint. Week 7 is in the books. We're here to recap and go over all the fun that happened this last weekend. But before we jump into anything, we always start with our rapid round. Today, we're going to do this in the order of who has the longest scar on their body, and we'll tell some of the stories behind that. Steve, why don't you go ahead and let us know about yours? We'll go around and figure out about the scars, and then we'll have the football talk.
Yeah, I think mine is approximately an inch long. It's not very big. It's on my thumb. The camera might even be able to pick that up. It looks like it's getting it. Um, but yeah, I did it opening a can of bacon bits for a salad. We had guests over this night. I think I was like a sophomore in high school or a freshman in high school, one of those two. And there's like rather than like those little like plastic cans of like the like really fake bacon bits, the ones that were almost like plasticky, like the actual bacon bits. These were fresh bacon bits, so they were like sealed. And so I couldn't get the can that it was like sort of a pop top, but I couldn't get it to pull across. And I had pulled so hard with my right hand, I'd stuck, my index finger in the little can holder thing, pulled, and it hurt. So I switched to my left hand and then yanked, but I left my thumb around the rim of the can. So I went boom, and it tore right through my thumb, bled all over the bacon bits. And I don't even know what happened the rest of that night as far as like the family came over we were hosting that evening, and Dad took me to urgent care, and we hung out there for a couple of hours before they stitched me up. So by the time we got back, the evening was over. I have no idea what happened. So
How many stitches?
I think it was just six or seven, something like that.
Okay.
Single digits.
I don't remember you getting stitches for that. I remember that happening vaguely. But I don't remember that being so deep. That's nuts.
Oh,
Corey, why don't you give us
wasn't there,
your?
right?
It's possible you were not there. Yeah, could have potentially been a freshman in college.
For me, let's see. I have two that are about 2 inches long. One of them is we were out in the Gulf of Mexico, down in Clearwater Beach. I swam out to the post, the buoy of the swimming area, and as I swam by, I cut my leg on a barnacle, and then I came out. Mom put two butterfly bandages on it, and just it healed pretty good. But it's a nice little scar. Looks cool. Then the other one, which is a little bit longer, is on my forearm up here. And I was playing basketball. I crossed some guy over, and he swiped for the ball and had really long fingernails, and he sliced my forearm open. Didn't have any. We didn't have anything like to keep the wound shut. So basically, we just took some paper towels, and then we found some caution tape and tied caution tape around it as much as we could to make it tight on there. But it worked out. So I mean, they're good stories.
Yeah, my longest scar is about an inch and a half. It's on this forearm right here, and I can't even tell you how I got it. I don't remember. I was, I think 6 or 7 years old, and I think it was playing out in the woods in our backyard, and like fell down, scratched it on a stick or something like that. I do have a scar that's right next to it. That's about the shape of a nickel that I got as a junior in high school. When I did a cartwheel too close to a table. I don't know who I was trying to impress at the time because that doesn't sound like me in general. But I cartwheeled, hit the table, clipped the corner of the table as I went down, and just the flap of skin just folded off. And I was like, oh, that's gross. I'm not going to be doing any more of that business. But yeah, inch and a half would be the longest one, and I wish I had the story to remember it, but I've got much better stories for other scars, like my teeth going through my lip or my ear coming a little bit off of my head. But still, 1.5 inches is about the longest one. Corey, you're muted if you were chiming in on that one. Oh, the mute button's got Corey right now.
Corey, cat's got your tongue.
My bad, dude. Did I pull your ear off to like check it at one point in time? Like you came in and I like
you did.
And then also your teeth. Then I pull your lip off your teeth and back up.
Well, that could be right. In my memory, that's Steven, but I was also little.
It wasn't me. No,
it was Corey. Okay.
That's fun.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I remember coming in because we were at our cousin's. Well, visiting our cousins at a party, and I had played football outside, and I just felt my ear snag on like a tree limb. But every time I went to feel it, it just felt like sweat, and I was like, I don't think that's actually bleeding. So I went downstairs to Corey and just asked him, "Is my ear bleeding?" And he just goes, "Oh, that's gonna need stitches." And immediately I burst into tears because I thought that's the end of the world. But yeah,
Did it need stitches?
Yeah, I got 7 stitches.
There you
Still a decent scar over the year. But Corey, you're our winner of the best battle scar. You'll take us first in the wrap around. I'll follow up, and then we'll have Steve.
That's funny because I didn't get stitches. You guys both did. My rapid reaction is we're in for a great end of this season. We're getting good matchup after good matchup after good matchup. I mean, we had Washington and Oregon this week. I can't even remember who it was last week because it was that good. Was it Texas and Oklahoma last week? I want rematches of both games. We get Ohio State and Penn State this next week. I mean, this is a glorious, glorious time to be a part of football. And part of it is because, and this is a stat from Bud Elliott, the top 15 teams in college football, when favored by 10 points or more, are 70-1. Basically saying, like, nobody's been really, really, really upset that shouldn't have been upset from the top perspective. And so we're getting these good teams that have handled business, but we're also, like, have big records on the line, and we're having good clashes from them. It's fun. I'm loving it. I'm grateful for it. Keep bringing it, you know?
My takeaway from this week, I started off this week and I was watching a few games. We had a lot of midweek action. But I was watching a few games and I felt like commentators and pundits as a whole were giving a lot of blame to coaches that I felt were players' fault. And I was thinking, in NFL it happens both ways. You end up blaming coaches and you say, oh, they're terrible. And then you also will go, hey, Zach Wilson's garbage for the Jets, despite them getting that win over the Eagles. But the players will get a decent amount of blame. I feel like in college it almost all goes to the coaches because even if your player makes a mistake, they'll be like, well, the coach should never put him in that situation. And so I was thinking that at some point this week, and then I listened to Frank Beavers' press conference after the game where he's saying, well, I'm calling all these pressures, but my players aren't running them. They're not doing their job. And I was like, oh, maybe this is the reason why you don't call up the kids. It just doesn't sound good. Doesn't matter who you are. It just sounds like you're punching down because the kids are so young. But it was just funny to me because I was like, the players are the one playing. Like, sometimes they should get some of the blame, I think. And then as soon as some of the blame was given, I was like, I get this is why this is covered this way, and this is why coaches talk this way. Because even if he's right, it doesn't sound great. Another quick couple things. One, Louisville tricked me for 1 week as to how good they were. I thought they were pretty bad until they played Notre Dame. They beat Notre Dame pretty easily, and I was like, oh, maybe they're decent. And then this week I go, oh no, they're who I thought they were. They just played up a week. Maybe Notre Dame had a little bit of an off week. Hopefully they won't trick me again. And the last thing, Brock Bowers is hurt and possibly for the season. Quick question in this rapid round. I'll get back to you, Steve, but quick question. How big of an impact is this for Georgia for the rest of the season?
Big. They lose a game because of this one.
Oh, I disagree. Or at least in the regular season. For me, this doesn't have implications until the SEC championship game. Yeah, I mean he's definitely their best player. That part is not up for debate. But I think that you're going to be able to see more of those skill players start to step up. I feel like Carson Beck has already started to emerge and to kind of compensate for what 3 or 4 weeks ago was a pretty heavy dependence on Brock Bowers to move the ball and to move the offense forward. I don't think they have anyone on their schedule where it's like, oh, if you don't have him, you're definitely losing the game. Obviously, he's a huge help if you're in Neyland against a very tough environment and need a couple of third down conversions to quiet the crowd. But I still feel like they're going to win that game. I don't think this looms large until at the very earliest the SEC championship game.
I would agree with you. I think that their team is stepping up, but I do think this is the hardest the schedule has been all year. Like they have been three out of the next 4 games are the hardest teams that they played. Not that they're overly hard because it is the SEC, and let's be honest, the SEC is this year, but they play Tennessee, they play Mississippi, and they play Missouri. So
yeah.
All
right, Steve, take us through your rapid reaction to Week 7.
My rapid reaction is no lead is safe. There's a couple of games here where you had what you think is either enough points and enough distance that no matter what kind of time is left, you're not going to give it up. Colorado up 29-0 at half. South Carolina up 10 with 9 minutes to go. West Virginia takes the lead on Houston with 30 seconds to go, and Garrett Green, their quarterback, is waving goodbye to the fans in Houston Stadium. And it's funny because I watched that after it had happened, so I knew the result, and it was just kind of really funny to see like the West Virginia sideline just act like they've won the game when they have in fact not yet won the game, and then they lose. So that was really kind of a fun group of games. I, like you said, Corey, I think we're in for a real treat of a season. It's been that way. The last several to me have not been. Boy, I think post-COVID, everything's been really good. But ahead of that, honestly, some of my interest in the sport started to wane just because it became the same 4 or 5 teams with, maybe one or two differences every year, but kind of, that same sort of the usual suspects in terms of winning the ultimate prize, and also not a whole lot of if memory serves me right, not a whole lot of banger games outside of it. This week and the last couple of weeks, I feel like we've had awesome matchups, really fun games, even when there's not a whole lot on the line, or maybe it's not a game that piques all the national interest. There's been some awesome football games. So, but no lead is safe. You got to protect it and defend it till the end.
That's a perfect lead-in for what we want to look at when we start diving into these individual games for Week 7. We're going to start with some of those games that you mentioned, Steve, that happened before Saturday. West Virginia versus Houston. Look for a minute like Houston had won the game. Then look for a minute like West Virginia had won the game. Turned a lot in the last few minutes here. But Steve, give us you said you rewatched it. Give us a little bit more of a dive beyond your rapid reaction on what happened with Neil Brown and his crew and Dana Holgerson getting the win.
Yeah. A couple things I wanted to just highlight about this game specifically. Like, this game again was played in Houston. Sorry, I don't have let me get the game recap up, and then I can speak a little bit more intelligently about it. But it was just really interesting because the game for large stretches was a 2-score game, right? So let's see. So, or I guess kind of going into in the second half, I should say, it was 10-7 at the end of the first quarter, 14-10 at the end of the second quarter, and low scoring, and then you have this offensive explosion in the fourth quarter. Sorry, let me pull this to my larger screen here. In the fourth quarter, in total, you'd had 38 points scored in the game, and then you have 42 points scored in the fourth quarter by itself. So crazy back and forth affair at the end, including multiple times Houston is up by, they take the lead to go up 28-24 with 12 minutes left. They score again with 7.5 left to go up 35-24. You figure that's kind of it. West Virginia scores a touchdown with 3.5 left to make it look better. But it's a 3-point game. They play great defense, and they end up getting a touchdown with 12 seconds left to take the lead by 4. And then a 49-yard tipped Hail Mary swings it back in Houston's favor. The game just got wild at the end there. And it was just a really fun environment. Neither of these teams is particularly talented, I don't think. Neither of them, I don't think, will be competing for conference championships or anything greater than that. But nonetheless, just that's what I love about the sport, is that on any given night, you can put together a group of 22 guys. I mean, and that's obviously more than that. It's 85, but 22 playing, 11 playing offense, 11 playing defense, and what that group can accomplish is really only limited by their ability to be disciplined, to believe in each other, and to have an awesome scheme. Because you see in this sport all the time teams that come together that are greater than the sum of their parts and produce awesome efforts. For instance, this last, I guess not this past week, but the week prior, USC is taken down to the wire by an Arizona team that, person for person across those two teams, I think you would say USC has greater talent, has greater recruiting pedigree, all of those things. But you put them in that setting, and you can get some really fun results, and you can see how a team can come together and accomplish great things. Now, obviously, Arizona loses that game, so maybe it's not the perfect example, but that's what I love about the sport. And this West Virginia Houston game was a lot like that. I kind of have this weird like I don't know like I don't know Garrett Green, but he went to our high school, and our high school was not any good at football. So it's just fun to be like, oh yeah, we have a couple of guys playing collegiate football from our school because our school was just so bad at it when I was there. And so like I always kind of like have this like weird like just like yeah, go Garrett Green, and he was the one that ended up like again waving goodbye to the fans with like 10 seconds left, and then they end up losing the game.
Yeah, tough for him because he had a pretty good performance down the most important part of that game. He
Oh yeah,
really turned it on and started to get things moving for him. This was awesome for me because one, I picked Houston on the point spread, and I think they were like 2-point dogs, and ended up getting the win with that Hail Mary. But also, two head coaches that were on kind of a preseason hot seat, and both of whom are doing better. I'd say better than we would have thought at this point. There's still a lot of season to be
yes.
played, but a pretty decent accounting for themselves. And you look at them going in the future of the Big 12, and you go, not competing at the top, but not necessarily going to be the bottom dwellers. There are other people who come to mind before those two. So a decent performance so far this season for these two. Corey, anything to add on in that game?
The only thing I'll jump on Bryce. Sorry, real quick. The only thing I'd say to that is like, I might snip this just because like if I'm right, I'm gonna circle back and remind you. Like I can see a world where Houston ends up being one of the top dogs in the new Big 12. It might take them a minute, but
Well, yeah, we've talked about this. Like Houston and UCF are poised to do some good damage there because they have the fan bases that they need, and they are in the recruiting hotbeds.
Talent-rich areas.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So we'll see. I mean, it'll be really fun. That's an off-season discussion, but just figured I'd throw in my 2 cents there.
No, and fun to monitor over the years how some of these teams might evolve, and especially in the NIL era, how that can change for these teams that have, like a UCF, who have a big alumni base, might be able to be more competitive in that area. We'll keep things rolling along. We have Colorado Stanford, again, one that you mentioned, Steve, in your rapid round. Corey, do you want to lead us off on this one and just give us a hint of what an incredible game that was?
So I took my wife out Friday night, and I came back and I knew Steve was watching our kids, and I was like, "Hey, how are the games going?" And Steve was like, "Oh well, the Colorado game was over long ago." And then he leaves after a little bit. I'm like, "I'll flip it on, whatever. I know it's 29-0. I checked it. I'll watch the second half." And before Steve gets home, I'm like texting him like, "Dude, turn your phone or turn the TV back on. You need to watch the rest of this game. Like this is going crazy." And Stanford just decided it was going to start clicking. Decided it was going to make every single play, and they ramped up the pressure on Shedeur Sanders, and it made it difficult for them to complete passes. And they put themselves in great shape to be in a position to win the game. They end up being able to force it to go to overtime, and in overtime they win. Specifically, I know the talk of is I'm not even pretending like I know his name. Elik Iomanor, or what do you say? Is that how you say it?
Something like that, I think. Iomanor.
This wide receiver he has 28 catches on the year. 13 of them are in this game. He has 500 yards. Nearly 300 of them are in this game. The dude just went off. And it was on Travis Hunter, which is kind of even more a little bit ridiculous. They started putting Travis Hunter on him exclusively, and he was still picking them apart. Albeit Travis Hunter was playing both ways, coming back from a rib injury, probably a little bit winded. He seemed like he wasn't quite up to the level we would have expected to him. I mean, he had 13 catches and 140 yards and 2 touchdowns on the other side of the ball. So, I mean, can you imagine doing that and having to do the other side? I don't know. But they literally just put the game in the quarterback's hands and let him pick the defense apart. And it did not look like a bottom Pac-12 team. And maybe that's because we have 2 bottom Pac-12 teams. The question is, where do you go from here? Like, Colorado has had now a few losses in a row that are not looking good, and this one is really not looking good. And I saw this the conversation being happening on Twitter. Like, what do you do? Because you have so many transfers that have come in, and they can't transfer out now. Like,
yeah,
because of the new rules, that's going to be interesting. Like, you've basically said this is our cap, a little bit. Whereas with the new rules, where you don't have a limit on 25 players, maybe you leave 20 spaces open and you take a healthy chunk, and that elevates your team a little bit, and then you take another 10 or 15 more, and that elevates your team a little bit. I mean, I know a lot of them are seniors, but we'll see how it goes. And then also, I don't know if any of you guys caught the conversation that was had with the Colorado team about their play and their practice habits from their coaches this last weekend too. No?
No.
Please elaborate.
So one of the coaches, I can't remember who it is, walks up and goes, "So I played in the pros for, I think it was like 12 years, and I coached for 17. So I've been in the pros for nearly 30 years or something like that." He's like, "And I can tell you that 95% of you are not going to get an invite to camp in the future, and 98% of you are not going to make a team because you don't care enough about this team. You aren't working hard enough. I've seen your practice habits. Your practice habits are the worst habits I've ever seen. Like, I hear you bad mouthing your coach about not getting the opportunity. No, the fact is you didn't earn it." And it's like, oh, but kind of realistic. I mean, these are players that transferred from teams. Either they were disgruntled, they couldn't be successful where they were, or, I mean, there's a few players that were starters that transferred, but most of them blamed it on their situation, and it's proving that it's like, oh, it wasn't really a situation. It was probably you. And so they're making the best they can with limited talent, to be honest. And Shadur's doing a good job. The scheme of the offense is doing a great job. That's keeping them in the games because it opens everything wide open. But in reality, like, the problem is this team lacks the defense, and they don't have the offensive caliber that, a USC has, where they can make up for it at, 4 out of 5 nights. So
Yeah, one thing that sticks out to me from the end of the game, aside from Io Manor mossing Travis Hunter, catching the ball off the back of his helmet, Colorado goes first in overtime again. And
Yes.
I don't know how they didn't get this one ironed out, but ultimately, like, the drive that wins for Stanford is them QB drawing 3 times in a row. They get a first down, and they go, forget it, we don't need to risk a fumble. We'll just kick it on 1st and 10, and we'll get out of here with our win. And that's what they're able to do because they went second, and they get the stop. Yeah, shouldn't have thrown that ball up for grabs. They should have been able to get a field goal on their possession before, where the interception is thrown. But even still, you make it really comfortable for Stanford because you chose to go first, and so you go first in 2 overtimes successively.
That's the most egregious part, right? Like, well, okay, it's not even the most egregious part. That's wrong. The most egregious part is choosing to be on be on offense when you've won the toss. But when you actually select offense, like you said, you've used your choice. If you want to be on offense, just defer. Every other person is choosing defense. Like, I don't know why you would want to be on offense first. To me, wow. It's that one to me is like, I mean, look, Deion Sanders is obviously, he knows more. He's forgotten more football than I've ever known, right? But you've got to, if you can't take yourself seriously as a head coach if you don't know why everyone else chooses defense there. Like, there is a right and a wrong decision, and you have now made the wrong decision twice. And both times it didn't really burn you. I mean, I guess this time it did in the second overtime, but like, I tweeted out from the CFB Paint account, like, Stanford needs to go for 2. When they scored that touchdown, I think they should have gone for 2 and won the game. Like, well, Corey, I see you shaking your head. Here's the philosophy. Like, if I kick this, we have to play another overtime where if I score a touchdown, I have to go for 2 anyway. So I might as well use my best 2-point play on the chance where it doesn't give Shadur another chance to get on the field.
And I understand that, but watching Stanford's defense being able to shut down and limit Shadur and that offense, I would have trusted my defense in a heartbeat, because they attacked in that third and early fourth quarter and made it very, very hard for Shadur to do anything. And I get analytics may say one thing overall, but when you're looking at one item, one opportunity, doesn't mean the analytics are right every single time. And so I honestly, that's what I would have done. I would have kicked the field goal and played again. And even we were texting back and forth, and I was like, nope, play defense. And then what happened? Defense proved to be the game winner right there.
I mean, to me, there's a correct process, and then there's the optimal result, right? I think the process was wrong, but the result ended up being right. Like
I don't think the process is wrong. Your defense has been doing great the entire second half.
Right, but how many times did Shedeur Sanders had the ball in the 25 to start in the second half?
Doesn't matter. He hasn't moving the ball 10 yards a lot of times. So
well, we see that differently. That's okay.
The team worked out.
Yeah, well, and that's the second time that I thought, I had the same thought with Colorado State when they went to overtime with Colorado. It was like, go for two, don't give Shedeur a chance to get back on the field. Like, where are they better? Is Colorado better on offense, or are they better on defense? They're definitely better on offense. What?
Who won that game?
Colorado, because Colorado State got scared.
I couldn't remember. I was just wondering. Being real.
Sorry?
I couldn't remember. That's why I was asking.
Oh. I thought you were trying to prove a point, and I was like, no, you're going to prove my point. No, so I think it's just interesting that that's happened, and that was my beef with Jed Fish this last week, again at USC. Like, I think you got to go for the kill. But that's enough for me on that. It was a really fun game to tune in and catch the last bit of after watching the first half, 29-0. I will say, in my defense, I switched over to a much more entertaining game, and that was the Utah State-Fresno State game, which went down to the wire as well. So,
one note I want to put on here is this puts a huge damper on Colorado's bowl game hopes. This was one that you needed to have. The remainder of your schedule is UCLA, at UCLA. You are home against Oregon State, home Arizona. That's probably your most winnable game is Arizona, maybe at Washington State, and then you're at Utah in Salt Lake City. You really needed this one. And right now, early this season, it looked like, depending on what sports book you're looking at, they were about 4 to 4.5 wins of the year was kind of the line. And it was looking like, they're going to be an easy over for that. Now, they might lose their last 6 consecutive and end up having a 4-8 season. Like that's a real possibility here, a real possibility. So interesting to see what happens with Colorado from here, especially with having a loss of that variety of a 29-point lead at halftime. Like even Deion Sanders in his press conference said, like, I haven't lost too many like that. Like this is going to take a second to shoulder.
Don't we expect them to not be favored in the remaining of the games? They have a bye week. But you play at UCLA, you play Oregon State, you play Arizona, at Washington State, and at Utah. Like, I don't expect them to be favored in any of those.
Me neither.
Not a single one.
Yikes.
And especially with Arizona was supposed to be your most winnable one, but now Noah Fafita's looking like a real baller. By the way, shout out Steve, because you had that a week ahead of him showing out against USC.
We were way ahead of the game. We were way ahead of the game.
All you, Steve. Well done.
All you. We had no idea. You knew. Any other thoughts on Colorado Stanford? All right, we're going to skip to the biggest game of the week. Washington, Oregon. It's where College Game Day was for ESPN this week. 2 top Heisman contenders in Bo Nix and Michael Penix going up against each other. And this game did not disappoint. I know there were some gripes from some fans as well as pundits on some game management tactics from Dan Lanning. I don't think they're crazy egregious. But in a game where it ends up being a 3-point difference, now we're going to get nitpicky about anything that goes on. Steve, do you want to kick us off on this Washington-Oregon game and give us your thoughts and insights?
What a game. Yeah, it was just a fun one. There was, I saw someone tweet out like the fan pulse of like what Washington fans were thinking at different times of the game. There's like, as the win probability goes up, they go up 2 scores and they're like, oh, we're going to run these guys. And then it goes like, oh no, we're like thinking, I think the way that he says it is like thinking about self-harm as Oregon really put the clamps on in the second half. Really surprising results in terms of just Washington at halftime had 22 points, and then over the course of the next, in the third quarter, 1 touchdown, and then just several drives. They scored with 10.5 minutes left in the third quarter and did not score again until a minute and a half left in the game. So Oregon really put the clamps on for a good long while there. In fact, if you look at just the drive charts for the Huskies in the second half, they score on their first one, then they punt after only gaining 4 yards, then they punt after only gaining 5. They go 58 yards and lose. They turn the ball over on downs, and then Oregon repays the favor, turning it over on downs. But yeah, what a game! I hear some of the gripes with Dan Lanning. The thing that to me is very interesting is there's parallels between this game and last year's game. I think I tweeted it out from our account. I don't know if you saw it, because Oregon last year did a very similar thing toward the end of the game where they were leading and have the opportunity to put the game away with a first down. They go for it on fourth. And if you remember last year, I can't remember who it is that slips. So yeah, it's with, let's see, it is with 3 minutes left. It's 4th and 1 at the Oregon 34, and it's a tie game. Sorry, it's not to put the game away. I thought I had that. It's not to put the game away, but it's to potentially keep the ball and win. And Noah Whittington slips on the turf. If you'll remember, the running back slips on the turf, turnover on downs at the Oregon 34, and Washington 4 plays, 8 yards, and a field goal that gives them the lead, and they end up winning the game. So I wonder if that's part of the consternation from Ducks fans. Is like we just watched the same movie play out 2 years in a row, and some of those opportunities have in some ways cost them. I would think that if I'm an Oregon fan, which I am not, I think I would be more frustrated with last year's because it's in a tie ball game and I'm on my own 33 or own 34. That to me is more egregious. This year, again, Dan Lanning has the opportunity to put the game away. Sorry, I've got the wrong one. Here it is. He has the opportunity to put the game away. They're up 4, and it's 4th and 3 at the Washington 47. And I tend to agree with this. I thought it at the time, but want to just give credit. I did hear Cover 3 talk about this, where it's like, if I go and I don't get it, Michael Penix at midfield may give me some time to go and answer a score. And they do. They have the opportunity. They missed the field goal, right? And no one's blaming the kicker for whatever reason. Like, that missed field goal was, what is that?
43 yards down the middle.
That's yeah. Oh yeah, and it's right in the center too, and he pushes it right. So I don't hear a whole lot of criticism going the way of the kicker, which normally feels like that's always what it is. You know, kickers almost always get blamed for it, but maybe it's because there's multiple
so many
decisions.
Opportunities for Oregon to affect the game during the game, and it wouldn't have had to come the kicker. That's
true. That's fair.
But yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think everyone started to view kickers as more of a coin flip than like an actual player on the field. So it's like, you never blame them because you always knew it was a coin flip. Like, coin has 2 sides. You always knew. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead, Corey.
I think that's a great way to handle it. Like, if you're beyond 30, 35, you're on 35, you don't know what's going to happen. Unless you've got a really, really consistent kicker. These aren't NFL kickers. They're college kickers for a reason. But I do think, like, this game is back and forth and crazy. It's a fun environment. Can we get this? I know I asked for Oklahoma, Texas round 2. Can we get this round 2 potentially? I mean, they both control their fate. They both play USC, Utah, and Oregon State to finish out the season. I think they both play all 3 teams. So they do control their fate. It's just a matter of can they get there.
Yeah, it's a backloaded schedule for both of them too. Like, they both have much tougher like final 5 games than they had opening. Well, I guess the final. I'll count this one in that, but. I guess this is their 6th game for both of them. Yeah, so their back half I think is much harder than their front half, just with the teams. But I'm not here to say I'm here for it.
I would love it, and I mean we're gonna have great games. I mean they got to play Utah, they got to play USC, they got to play Oregon State potentially. I think both of them do. I'm checking.
Both of them do, yeah.
Yeah. So those are the top 5 teams in the league, in their league. We're gonna have great games down the stretch. But who comes out victorious? Do we have a mangled Pac-12 where nobody actually ends up going to the playoffs because they all beat each other up, or do we actually get somebody that comes out relatively unscathed, 1 loss or so, and can make the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm wondering who's gonna play spoiler. Because I think somebody is going to take a loss or two and then tank someone
Yep.
else's season. And I'm excited for all of it. Like, don't get me wrong, I'd love to see this matchup again, but I'm really excited to watch Oregon State play these teams. Like that
Yes.
excites me in a major way. One thing that was interesting for me in this game was I kind of expected the offenses, and don't get me wrong, the offenses scored 33 and 36 points. Like they put up a lot. The defenses looked good to me. And that was one thing I wasn't sure if they were going to look competitive on the field. I thought there'd be times where players would just be run downfield behind them or getting way too much in a running lane. These defenses look good, and it excites me for the playoff for whoever, should there be a team that comes out of Pac-12. I don't have to worry about it being a USC where there's no defense there. It's going to be a complete team that makes it. And so that was something that I really enjoyed, but also it's really cool to see because we know how high-powered these offenses are, these particularly Oregon and Washington. And these defenses, they really brought it, even though, again, 33 points is not what you intend to give up as a defense. Still, this was not a bad performance and not a bad fight in that regard.
Yeah, just like you said, Brian, like I think in the last couple of years, particularly the last 2 years with Washington, but even further back with Oregon, you think about those and you think of more finesse teams, right? Like high-powered offenses, but even then, like not physical offenses by and large.
Mm-hmm.
I guess with Mario Cristobal, they were a bit more physical too, but like this was a physical game. Like this was. I wondered if Washington's defense would be able to answer the bell. In fact, I doubted their ability to do that, and they showed up. Again, they didn't make every single play. They gave up 33 points, but they made a ton of plays when it counted, stopping Oregon on fourth down multiple times to either prevent points from being on the board or get the ball back to your offense so that you can go and reclaim the lead. So it was what an awesome game. We should do like a fan perspective. I know Will, my buddy, was at the game, so I should try and get his take on it, like we did with Kyle from the OU Texas game. But what an awesome one! Sign me up for another one. I think this is becoming a really fun. When I pay attention to rivalries, I love watching like coaches that I think are going to be there for a while fight it out. Like when Harbaugh showed up at Michigan, I was like, oh, Urban Meyer, Jim Harbaugh for the next 10 years is going to be awesome. Obviously, it didn't quite last that long, but and same thing with Sark and Jimbo Fisher. I was like, oh, okay, perfect. They're going into the SEC now. Jimbo, we'll see. But those are things that I think are really fun and exciting. I'm also excited to see Nick Saban and Hugh Freeze tangle for however long Saban's still in the game. But so Kalen DeBoer, Dan Lanning, I think are going to continue to go to war for the next for the foreseeable future, and it's going to be awesome.
And a great pickup for the Big Ten. Honestly, like you could not have picked up better teams on this one.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Definitely two teams you can see this year not only making it to the playoff, but competing for a title.
Making noise.
As good as anyone we've seen. It's a very similar vibe to last week watching Oklahoma, Texas, where you go, yep, these are championship caliber teams.
That's what it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Any last thoughts on that game? We're going to move to two non-caliber or championship caliber teams. Notre Dame, USC. I've been waiting for this one. I've been waiting for some time for USC to. I mentioned it last week where I said somebody's going to say Arizona's going to be the one to say the emperor is naked. Notre Dame's the one to say the emperor is naked. USC just has this ability to beat up on itself and put themselves in bad situations, and then usually we just wait on that wizard, Caleb Williams. He'll do enough. We'll get the win. It won't be pretty, but who cares? Because wins, losses, all that matters. Which I can side with. I also think wins and losses are relatively all that matters. But this was a Notre Dame team that didn't beat itself, and that took the ball away a lot. And Caleb Williams wasn't a wizard on this day. He was mortal. And it just got uglier and uglier the more USC tried to dig out. Notre Dame had 13 first downs on the day. USC had 23. But the problem was USC just couldn't get out of their own way. You have 5 turnovers to Notre Dame's, I believe, 0. You have 9 penalties for 80-something yards. Notre Dame has 5 penalties all game. it was just a matter of one team's playing clean, and that is getting them elite field position on any given down or any given possession. If they need the possession, sometimes their defense just scoring for them. And you have the other team that's not playing clean, and they're putting themselves in disadvantageous situation repeatedly, and it leads to a blowout win for Notre Dame. Steve, Corey, thoughts on USC's first loss of the year?
I think you kind of nailed it. You look at this box score and you're like, unless you look at the turnovers, you're like, Notre Dame got severely outplayed. But the reality is they didn't. They didn't have to play very well. They have hidden yards throughout the entire thing. Normally you have to go a full field. They don't have to deal with as many punts because there's 5 turnovers. And then when USC does score, they run it back 99 yards for a touchdown. That's hidden yardage. I mean, this is – who would have thought that this team would dominate USC like this? And it was just a sight to kind of behold. The fact that they were able to have a running game and a passing game, the fact that Sam Hartman started to throw the ball downfield again, like we haven't seen that since like the first week or two, and it was actually somewhat effective. Maybe USC's, we all know USC's defensive backs are not that good, so maybe that's the reason why, because he couldn't sure as heck do it against Louisville. But I'm excited. How many more losses does USC get? That's what I wonder.
Let's look at their schedule.
Yeah, so the Pac-12 doesn't get easier.
Home against Utah, at Cal, home against Washington, at UCLA, or at Oregon, excuse me, and then home against UCLA. Yeah, this was the one that I think we talked about this heading into the season, where this was the Pac-12's like middle finger to the sky to USC for leaving. And they just like, how can we make it as tough as possible for them? Yeah, I say I think 3 makes sense. I think probably versus Washington at Oregon are probably the 2 most likely, but I don't see you going 2-0 against Utah and UCLA.
Yeah, we'll see how Dante Moore does. He's kind of been beating himself lately. But I agree. But if you get Eric, Rising playing for that Utah team, I mean, maybe Rusty, who knows? But
I don't know.
This week, so
I saw a Utah fan recently tweeting, hopefully they can redshirt Rising and Keithy and just roll it over to next year.
They might not need them in order to be competitive in the Pac-12. Let's be honest, they've been doing pretty well.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, they've got a lot of tough games coming up, but they, still have a tough defense and a coach who I believe a lot in. So, yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as you, Steve. Like between those two, UCLA and Utah, I could see one of those dropping in, and those other 2, I think, for sure. But yeah, USC got some work to do, and it should look like a very different team next year without Caleb Williams, because it has been something to watch this year, and something's got to happen different. We haven't seen a history of Lincoln Riley teams being poor. That's hard to imagine, but I also am not seeing the evidence that it's going to be great. So, any other thoughts on that one? We don't have to go too much into a huge long blowout. All right, we'll keep things rolling. We're going to move over to the ACC, who had a ranked matchup this week, although one of those teams is no longer ranked. North Carolina takes down Miami 41-31, in a game that's a bit more dominant than the end score would have you believe. It wasn't quite 10 score. There was a lot of work done in the end of that game in Miami to try to get competitive. I don't think they're making it pretty, but it was a tall task catching up. Corey, any thoughts on that one?
This is the second week in a row we've seen this UNC team play some pretty good defense. We've seen a little occasionally where they've gone off. They haven't been there, but this team scares me if they're able to play defense, because that offense can score points in bunches, and if their defense can slow people down, they're capable of beating pretty much anybody. It's just a matter of having a good defense on that day, or good enough defense on that day. I think we're headed towards. I think there's a good chance UNC goes undefeated. I don't feel like their schedule is super difficult for the rest of the year. I don't think Florida State necessarily goes undefeated. I think it's a little bit more difficult, even though I think both teams are expected to win the remainder of the games by 7, or like the likelihood that they lose is like 70 percentile or something like that. Both teams still face Duke, and then UNC does face Clemson, but we'll see how that goes. Like, this Clemson team is not the Clemson team of old, and so we'll get more information as they face Miami this next week as well. So,
yeah, the Duke game is interesting going forward because it's the question of, is Riley Leonard there or not? He's a heck of a quarterback, and especially if he's there, can he use his legs? Because that's a big part of his game and what he can do. Steve, thoughts on this UNC Miami game?
Yeah, it was really interesting. It was just kind of 2 weeks in a row where Miami can't get out of its own way. I don't know if you saw, like, they fumbled a surefire touchdown like early in that game. They fumble, turn the ball over, it takes 6 points off the board, or 7 points off the board for Miami. And who knows, if they're up 10 at half, again, the complexion of the first half would have changed too, because I believe it's in the first quarter. But they go into the locker room up 3, and that that third quarter happens, and man, like, halftime adjustments, like, I know it's only 15-20 minutes, what, between halves. Is it 15 or 20 minutes now? I'm forgetting. I think it's 15.
It's
It's
20.
not a lot of time. It's 20.
Yeah.
It's not a lot of time to make changes but you go from down 3 to you outscore them 21-0 in the third quarter, and turn a game where you're losing into kind of a laugher pretty quickly, with some awesome play calling. I thought the offensive play calling was really neat to free up Tez Walker multiple times, and that guy is very special, and I am very excited to watch him the rest of the way, because Drake May has proven, with oh gosh, now I'm blanking his name. Who is the
Josh
the
Downs.
superstar? Josh Downs, the superstar receiver last year. Like, he will feed a guy and continue to get it, and or to give him opportunities. Tez Walker is going to be, priority number one for defensive coordinators moving forward. But they have other weapons. Like, the biggest thing to me, I love that running back. Man, he, gosh, and I'm forgetting his name now.
Hampton. First name I'm forgetting, but Hampton's the last
Omarion
name.
Hampton.
Thank you.
Omarion Hampton. Man,
He's a hard runner.
yeah, you don't see guys that are 6'2" and 220 with that light of feet, but are also that willing to get physical and right from the word go. I feel like he runs physical within his first 2 steps, which for most backs, like, I mean, even Derrick Henry's like this to a certain degree, where he has to kind of get moving before he becomes a load, and it's really difficult to tackle. And if you get him before that momentum starts, your chances of bringing him down are pretty easy. Martin Hampton, I'm not comparing him to that. I'm just saying in terms of styles. But Martin Hampton, I feel like he runs tough right from that first step. Like, he's just hard to tackle, very physical, and pairing a pretty, it was very good this week, but I think to this point in the season, you probably call the UNC ground game competent. But a competent ground game with a lethal passing game becomes a very good ground game after when you have to commit more resources to defending the receivers over the top.
One of the things I think is kind of interesting about him is he's a little bit like, I'm a fan of him, but he has been a little bit up and down. He like, against Appalachian State, he had like 200 something yards. Against UNC or Miami, he has like almost 200 yards. But then the other games, he averages only like 3.7, 3.5, 5.2. And then the other two that we talked about, it's an 8.2 and a 9.0 yards per carry. So it's like a little bit boom or bust. But it also seems like if Drake May's not doing everything they need to, they do have an opportunity to lean on this. So.
Yeah. The other thing that I wanted to just say in response to Brian, you said, like, it's not like Miami was trying to make it look better. I would say they were trying to make it look better.
Okay.
I don't think they were trying to win. I really don't. Look at how fast, or how not fast, I should say, they were playing in that fourth quarter. Like, the lack of urgency to me was concerning. If I'm a Miami fan, like, either our coaches aren't sharp enough to get in a play call quick enough to get going things, and I don't think that's the case, right? Or they've raised the white flag, and they're saying, we want to make sure this looks like a competitive loss, but we're really not playing to win. There were 2 different drives. Hold on, let me get it right in front of me. There were 2 different drives where they had opportunities to really kind of close the gap in the third quarter, or I think in the fourth quarter, excuse me. And they just, I mean, it's not like they weren't trying to move the football, but they were just doing it so, like, methodically and so slowly that you're killing your own chance to have to win the game. It almost reminded me of an old, if you'll remember, there's a a couple of years ago, North Carolina played Florida State. I guess it was not last year, but the year prior. So they played in Chapel Hill, and Florida State jumps out to a lead, and then North Carolina goes on a drive, and I think it's like a 9 or a 10-minute drive that ends in a touchdown, but you're down, I think, still down 2 scores, and it's like you just bled the clock on yourself, like, and so that was the one thing that was surprising to me. Like, let me see if I can find the drive chart here. Here it is. Play by play. Miami in the fourth quarter has a touchdown drive that takes, I guess that one only took 3.5 minutes. Maybe it was the one on, yeah, maybe it was the one where they lose on downs. It's 8 plays, 19 yards, in almost 3 minutes. Like, you're taking 3 minutes to go 8 plays and only 19 yards. Like, there's a couple times where it's like, I don't know what the sense of urgency was like for certain periods of time for that Miami offense
and if you go to the
when you
before
needed
that,
to score.
The drive before that, it's 3 plays, 2 minutes. Like,
yeah, exactly. Just a couple of them where it's just like, what, you are down by a bunch of scores. We need to start picking up the pace here, and they just don't do it. So
we know on the defensive side of things they don't get the signal in real quick because sometimes the D coordinator has to run out onto the field to give free first downs on fourth down. It's a bad loss for Miami. We don't have to dive in super long on this because they're an unranked team, but now also the bottom team in the ACC. 0-2 in ACC play. This is a team that we thought was going to be competing potentially for an
and
ACC
they play
title.
Clemson next.
They get Clemson next. Yeah. Tough road. Do wheels come off, or do we band together and figure it out? We'll leave it to Miami to decide that. We're going to keep on talking about games that happen on Saturday, and we're going to talk about another team in the Sunshine State. Florida gets the win over South Carolina, out South Carolina, 41-39. Steve, do you want to lead us off on this one?
Yeah, I can lead us off because I can't take us home on this one. I've only seen the first half. I obviously know the result, but like earlier today I was going through the game, and man, that game was wild. So a very entertaining game. If you're someone that's a fan of points, go ahead. It was 24-21 at halftime. Back and forth affair. The way that South Carolina has been able to, I don't even know if I can say manage because they're 2-4, but they've scored points. The offense has done, as far as putting up points, maybe not like on a down-to-down basis, but is putting up points behind an offensive line that really doesn't do a whole lot. Like, I don't know. Like, Spencer Rattler has earned a lot of my respect back. I was one that kind of left him for dead back in Oklahoma, and even last year I was just like, yeah, he's fine. Like, he's a fine college quarterback. That guy has played some really tough opponents with a lot of, or I guess with a lot of adversity given the personnel he's working with on his offensive line. They've got great skill talent at South Carolina, so like he's throwing to some really talented guys, and their running back, whose name is now escaping me, Mario Henderson, I want to say, but that could be wrong, is a pretty fun player to watch too. But man, back and forth affair. This is one, again, Brian, you may have to fill in some gaps for me. I know that they're leading by 10 with about 9 minutes to go, and Florida makes the comeback. And I think that they had a couple of things like a tipped pass touchdown and a few other things, but just a fun one that I think Billy Napier needed to have. And I think lots of people are going to be looking at Shane Beamer and kind of questioning where's this going. Although, I mean, he's recruiting pretty well. They've got some opportunities. They were that close. Like, I'm not ready to sell on Shane Beamer just yet at South Carolina. I think that it might just take another year or two. And also, you're going to lose your quarterback, so you may need to go portaling for a QB, I think. But go ahead, take us through the rest of the game, Bri.
Yeah, so you have a couple. First of all, Florida's defense bows up and starts making some stops. They really needed that because they had ground to make up. But you have 3 fourth downs in the last 2 scoring drives. They have one drive at the end of the game that is a time waster drive, not a scoring drive to catch up. But they need 2 touchdowns in quick succession. they're able to convert 3 fourth downs in those 2 drives. One's a 4th and 10, one's a 4th and 11. On top of that, one of those drives ends with a a tipped pass, so a slant thrown, goes through the hands of the wide receiver it was intended for, goes straight into the hands of another wide receiver to convert. Just kind of everything was falling together nicely for them. One of those 4th and 11 plays, they throw a screen pass, not a screen, like a wide receiver pop pass, like a quick to the 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage, and it's just a one-on-one. Can you tackle this guy or not? And South Carolina guy misses it. Florida guy runs for 13 yards and is able to get the first. Just a little bit of a meltdown from South Carolina, a little bit of luck going Florida's way, and the defense on their side played really well. Once they get in the position they need to, they get the interception from Spencer Rattler, and then their final drive, they are able to waste some time off the clock. They take a smart safety on a 4th down because they know, hey, if we take this safety, there's only going to be 2 seconds left on the clock. We can kick it short, and they'll be forced to do some razzle-dazzle stuff on the kick return rather than running an offensive play. And it works perfectly. It executed really well by the Gators on the stretch. But a game that you walked away from going, man, you feel snake bitten if you're South Carolina. Florida, you got away with one, but hey, doesn't matter. It's a win. And one that Napier and his team needed. South Carolina now 2-4. Is that right?
Yeah.
Not the season they were hoping for, not the season they were expecting, and now kind of looking for answers.
So Florida has a 5-2 record, same as LSU. Who's better? Just kidding.
LSU.
Hard to say.
So I've heard some Florida fans complaining about some of the chatter of who's been nominated for Heisman, et cetera, Heisman odds and stuff like that, considering what Graham Mertz has done. So I went and pulled a bunch of the quarterbacks. I pulled Jordan Travis, Drake May, Spencer Rattler, Graham Mertz, Quinn Ewers, Dylan Gabriel, Caleb Williams, Michael Penix, J.J. McCarthy, Jaden Daniels. Crazy enough, they all have pretty similar lines in the fact that, like, they all have kind of like 12, 13, 14, 15 yards of touchdowns and then like 2 or 3 interceptions until you get to like the Caleb Williams and Michael Penix and the Jaden Daniels. And it's like a jump up in like 20 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. And so it's kind of, or 4 interceptions, depending on who it is. And then like the ratings even jump. It's weird because you have like a ton of ratings that are like 160s. And so your quarterbacks are a bunch above average. You know, Jordan Travis is at 154, Drake May's at 159, Spencer Rattler's at 163, Graham Mertz is at 163, Quinn Ewers is 163, Dylan Gabriel's 178. And then you jump up and you got Caleb at 187, Michael Penix at 189, and J.J. McCarthy at 195. Interestingly enough, you have Jaden Daniels at 197, and he's only had one game under 100 and 170 this entire year, which was against Florida State, where he posted a 141. Like, it's just kind of fun to watch these quarterbacks and see who really is it. And really, the matter is are you good, but also is your team good? I think that's what puts you in this running. Because I think
100%. I was just gonna say, to any Florida fans that are curious, I'll clue you in. It's the two plus score losses on the road that it's preventing Graham Mertz from getting any love there. It's because, yeah, he had and in those performances, like, his numbers look fine in both of them. So against Utah, he's 31 for 44 with 333 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. That's, those are fine numbers, but it's a pretty hollow 300 yards when you score 11 points, right? Like,
yeah, and it's also interesting, like, he has one of the highest completion ratios in the country. I think he's like 2nd or 3rd in the nation, which is kind of crazy from where he was, a few years back.
Yeah.
His average yards per completion is not in the top 10.
And you've been all over that, Corey. I think you were ahead of that before the season, where you were kind of talking about when you're on the Florida over wins. You're like, look, they're not going to ask him to do things that he's maybe not comfortable doing, like pushing the ball down the field. Man, you nailed that one. You're going to give me credit for Fifita. I'm going to give you credit for that one. You're all over that one. And that's one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, it maybe keeps you more competitive in games, but maybe it doesn't give you the opportunity to blow games wide open
or win big games. Yeah, I 100% agree with you, and that's what we've seen. They've squeaked by on some games and then they got blown their doors open by a Kentucky team that can't really pass the ball. So who knows?
Any other thoughts on that Florida-South Carolina matchup?
Just excited to see the second half.
All right, we'll keep things rolling. We're right about at the hour mark, so we might pick up the pace just a tad. But Oregon State, UCLA. I don't know if either of you got eyes on this one. Never really in doubt, though. Oregon State was never, after they'd opened up a 2-score lead, never was within a 1-score. Like, not only did UCLA not have the ball with a chance to tie or go ahead, they never had the ball with a chance to go. I should say that they never were within 1 score, not even after what they did on offense. So it ends up being close-ish, like a close 2-score game, but was always a 2-score game, a pretty dominant performance. And Dante Moore starting to have a little bit more trouble. He's now at 10 touchdowns on the year, 7 interceptions. He's had a couple of these games where he's looked a little bit more shaky, but also they're putting a lot on him. I did like that they ran the ball a lot more with Carson Steele this game compared to previous weeks. But it's still have a lot of attempts from Dante Moore, and I think this is a team that's just maybe a year out. I really like Moore. I think he's very talented and will be very good. Right now, his stat line doesn't show it because he's young and he's doing a lot. And he's playing in the best conference in college football, I think. But yeah, a good win for Oregon State and sets them up well to now try. You know, they have the one loss in conference, but they get the crack at the big boys and they have a chance to, you know, make a move into the conference title game. And any thoughts on UCLA, Oregon State?
Yeah, I think you've nailed this a little bit. Dante Moore is like the key here, and he wasn't the original starter. They kind of ramped him up. He had they played easier teams at the beginning, but then like got into the heart of the schedule, and he's been the quarterback. He's averaging like 38 throws a game, but he's also averaging 2 picks a game and a pick 6 a game almost. And it kind of makes it really difficult for you to be successful when you are averaging that. He's been thrown into the fire. It makes sense to do this because Chip Kelly isn't under any fire like of being fired, and in reality you're setting yourself up for the next year, saying, all right, we got Dante Moore, we know he's a good quarterback, we just get him in there. The game will slow down for him, we'll start to see that, but I mean the schedule just still gets harder, and so hopefully next year you get the dividends that you need in reality.
Yeah, and I think it'll help having a few Northwesterns and Minnesotas and the sort of things that you don't have in the Pac-12 you'll have in the Big Ten. And those things will go a long way for a developing quarterback. Like, you know, look at JJ McCarthy where he is now versus last year. He wasn't bad last year by any means, but we'll get into Michigan in a moment.
How many teams in the Big 12 or in the Pac-12 can win the Big 12 can win the Big 10 West? All of them?
7 or 8?
9. At least 9.
Like, that's insane. That tells you how top heavy that conference is. Anyways, go on.
Yeah, and you can add, if you added the bottom 4 teams from the Big Ten East, I don't think the result changes.
I think you've almost got some head-to-heads that give you some ideas of this. All right, Colorado crushed Nebraska, right? Nebraska's not very good, but like that's the bottom of the Pac-12 beating the bottom of the Big Ten West.
Well, and
conversely, you have Washington State
Michigan
beating Wisconsin, who up until this last week was probably the favorite to win the Big Ten West. And you've got kind of a middle of the road Pac-12 team. Middle of the road being like, you know, they're probably the 5th, between like what 4th and 6th is where they finish. I think something like that probably.
Yeah, that's probably true. Hey, what are the odds that Iowa wins the Big Ten and doesn't hit 25 points a game in their offensive coordinator?
Big Ten West or the Big Ten?
Big Ten. I would say, like, what if they went 11-1?
4%.
Yeah,
I think their odds of getting there are really good. I just think.
Yeah, the odds I think they won that last game are 71% that they'll make it to the championship game.
Excellent.
Oh, that would be an absolute scene, though, to watch the OC get fired for winning the Big Ten. Gosh, now I'm just gonna start praying for that every day because that would be unbelievable off-season work for us. We're gonna indulge ourselves a little bit. We've got 3 Tallahassee boys, and Florida State is looking as good as they've looked all season. They've had bigger games, but they haven't had more put-together games, perhaps, than their win over Syracuse. Corey, you want to take us a little bit through that one?
Yeah. So we haven't talked about Florida State this a little bit because in reality they played a few good games and then they played nobodies and they played in those games. To be honest, it's interesting to watch this team. The last game and a half, last 2 games, the defensive coordinators decided to get a little bit more aggressive with his team and ramp it up. The blitzing has been and the pressure has been significantly higher basically since the second half of the Clemson game, and we've seen it produce dividends for this Florida State team. The one thing that's kind of interesting, it's like this Florida State team, I put it in that category of like a Georgia and Ohio State, where maybe not Ohio State, where like this team is capable of so much more, and they're still winning. Can they hit that gear? I feel like you have Washington, you have Michigan, and some of that are hitting those gears, that are winning those teams, or winning the ways they should. But Florida State, I put that. I mean, you won 41-7 or 41-3. UNC just beat the same team last week, 48-7. But you did it pretty dominating fashion. And as an FSU fan, you were disgusted by the play in the second half and thought you left tons of points on the board. So this team's capable, but they just got to put everything together.
Yeah, you beat LSU and Clemson the first month of the season, but you have a non-existent run game in that first month, and your defense is spotty. It's not good at creating big negatives. Like it's kind of a bend don't break. And what we've seen in the last couple weeks is they've experimented more with the run. So I wouldn't say the run game is fully established, but it used to be a heavy counter-based run. Now they run a lot of down as well as outside zone, and it seems to be at least a little bit easier for the linemen to find the right people. And like you said, defense has been more aggressive. Shaheem Brown, who plays safety, has spent so much time down in the box in the last couple games. And normally Florida State just says, okay, we're going to play cover two. We're two high safeties, and you're going to have nothing long. You're going to have to score on us in 11 plays. It's been a little bit different strategy, but they're looking better than they ever have. And that's an exciting thing for them because they need to hit a different gear come playoff time should they get there. You know, if they're going to play UNC in the ACC title game, if they're going to make it to a playoff. We talked about how Washington, Oregon looks like a title contender. Florida State hasn't quite looked like that, and that's the gear that we're waiting on and seeing. It looks like it's there, but can they make it happen?
But what we are talking about, is a little crazy. Like they beat the best team in the SEC potentially, and we haven't hit that gear. We saw it for a half in that team. Like, and also, is Keon Coleman not the best transfer this year across all? I mean, that's a great pickup.
Tough to name a much better one. I don't think anybody saw him as like, oh, this is a Biletnikoff Award contender. You know, like I think everyone thought he's probably maybe a wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2. We didn't know he returned punts. That's news. Like that was not something that we had on the sheet when he was coming over. We didn't realize he was going to make ridiculous one-hand catches and jump over defenders for fun. Yeah, if he got fed a little bit more, he could be coming for some awards in the end of the season. But man, what a weapon! And what he can catch the ball short and run at you. He can take the top off. He's got enough speed to take the top off your defense as well. He's something to
a red zone threat. He's everything.
Jump ball. You can. It's something that on every play that he's in there, you got to know how you're accounting for him and if it's sufficient because it's an issue. Steve, any thoughts?
No, I mean, how refreshing as an FSU fan to have a team that wins games. Like, it's awesome.
I mean, hasn't lost in 365 days.
Yeah, that exactly. It's amazing. Because it was not that long ago that it was like, man, will we ever make a bowl? Like,
yeah.
I don't know if I have a whole lot else to say on that. Just like, yeah, it's a team that I agree. I don't think it's reached its potential, and so that makes it intriguing to watch moving forward. It's also like, all right, we're seeing other teams like Michigan hit that gear now, and so it's if you're not rounding into form, maybe this is who you are. But again, their most complete performance. So I'd like to see, kind of what happens with Duke, and really what I'd like to see is Duke with a fully healthy Riley Leonard and get a better measurement of where this team is at, because I think that's a team that could challenge your defense, and then also give your offense some challenges with the defensive schemes from Mike Elko and some of the talent that they have in the front four of their defense. So shame you probably won't get him. I mean, he might still play in that game. I don't know if he's been officially ruled out, but
he hasn't.
I am not confident that you'll get him at full strength if he plays. So,
I don't think so. Two other things. This Florida State team has the third longest streak in the nation behind Georgia and Washington. Georgia with like whatever they are at, I can't remember. It's like
It's got to be getting close to 30 at this point.
yeah, I don't know how it is right now. And then Washington at 13, and Florida State's at 12, and Florida State's scored over 30 points in every single game this year. Like that's quality, scheming from your offensive coordinator or Mike Norvell in this case. And then the last thing I wanted to say about this game is anybody catch Mike Norvell running alongside Keon Coleman on a punt return?
It's got some wheels.
Kind of releasing his inner Red Lightning a little bit.
there's a deep cut for you too.
Yeah. There you go.
Carry on that legacy. Mike Norvell does race a couple of defensive linemen 100 yards at the beginning of every practice, so he's been training quite a bit for that, but I was impressed running alongside Keon Coleman. He still looks pretty decent. Not competitive, but he's got some speed. I wouldn't take him in a foot race, that's for sure. Last game that we want to touch on, and more so team that we want to touch on, because we haven't talked about them much this whole year, but they've looked good for quite a while. Michigan 52, Indiana 7. This was exciting for a quick second when Indiana scored on their first drive. It became very quickly unexciting when Michigan said, we're better in every facet of this game. We're going to dominate you, and you're going to just watch us do it. Some thoughts on the Wolverines. We haven't had to see them against big competition yet, but they're starting to look really, really complete. They're starting to look like a team that executes on a really consistent basis. Thoughts, insights?
I actually don't have much because I really haven't watched much of them because the first month and a half of the season I was like, okay, are we really going to glean that much from them beating up on? Now I'm blanking on who they even played.
Bowling Green, UNLV,
yeah,
East Carolina. Nobody.
Thank you. So yeah, it's just like I don't know what we're going to learn from those, but the scores have become more and more lopsided as the competition has theoretically gotten better.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's one that I'm probably going to go back and look at and just kind of get to know that team a little bit better. I feel like I know some of the players on it, but I don't know how they've been working together this year because I really haven't had too much incentive to watch them. They got a night game at Michigan State. I mean, that's a brave choice of NBC to choose that as the night game because I feel like that will be that'll be a lot of filler. Yeah, I was gonna say the broadcast team better come up with a lot of anecdotes to share about Michigan in that game because I don't know if you're gonna have a whole lot of game to comment on.
Yeah, you're gonna learn about the growing up conditions of their punter in that one for sure.
One of the things I find like this team has only allowed like 10 points once, and then everything else has been 7 and under. Like even against mediocre competition nowadays, that's really good because you see a lot of people put in their backups and you still let people score, and they're not letting people score. The other thing is JJ McCarthy, albeit he has not thrown the ball a ton compared to other quarterbacks. I mean, if all those quarterbacks I listed earlier, he has thrown the ball 40 times less than the second to least quarterback. He's completing 78% of his passes. I think that leads the nation, and he's averaging 10.6 yards per attempt. Like that's making your money's worth, making it count, and moving it methodically methodically down the field. I'm excited to see this team tested. I'm sad that they get only 2 tests this year.
Yeah, JJ McCarthy's the one who's like the only question mark, and if you're not on the video, you're not seeing my air quotes on question mark because we know he's decent, like we know he's pretty good, but he also has a running game that is extremely good. He gets a lot of play action passes that are extremely effective because you have to respect it, and he's rarely in passing downs. Rarely being relative to other quarterbacks across the country. Obviously, every game he's in passing downs. They don't have success on every play, but that provides a perfect soil for your plant to grow. Can he grow just as well in a soil that gets muddied by a Penn State or Ohio State front? I'm excited to see because it looks like he's gone a different level up from where he was last year, but he hasn't been put under near the duress that he was at certain times last year, and that will be the real proving ground. But Wolverine's looking as good as anybody in the country right now, and kind of on the same track as Georgia, where it's just like, yeah, until proven otherwise, like you just Except, yeah, they get wins. We're going to keep going with this, and they'll get that number 2 ranking, or number, up there, and they'll have a few first place votes. But they've just looked impervious to anybody's attempts to make any headway against them. That's going to do it for our game recaps and wrap ups. Let's go to some parting shots to end off the pod. Steve, anything you got in the holster?
Now, I've got a parting shout out. So we always end negative. I don't know why we do that, but here's a tweet from Blair Willis at Blair Willis UA. Michael Penix Jr., Caleb Williams, and Cameron Ward have combined to throw 57 touchdown passes this season. Against Arizona, they combined for only 1 passing touchdown. Arizona's quietly a very good team, and that defense is playing pretty good. So shout out. They're one of those teams that I have kind of like this little like small affinity for. And the weird thing is, like, I know that this probably sounds insane to a Wildcat or to a Sun Devil, but I actually kind of like both programs there because I don't have a specific dog in the fight. So I kind of root for both of them. Obviously, when they play one another, you can't really do that, but just fun to see those teams kind of start to. Well, I guess Arizona's, in my opinion, we'll find out when the Territorial Cup is actually played, but they're continuing to make strides, even though their roster gets rated by everyone. Like USC has, I think, 2 or 3 starters from Arizona's team from last year, and then they lost a couple other guys. One, I think, went to LSU. A defensive lineman went to the SEC somewhere. I can't remember exactly. LSU, Arkansas, maybe something like that. But so quick shout out to them. Defense is playing pretty salty. Offense, again, is strong with 2 or 3 NFL wide receivers on it, and a capable quarterback in Noah Fifita. Yeah, go Wildcats. Bear down.
I'll tack on. I'll end positive as well. Oklahoma State. They get an upset win over Kansas this week. Not a team that I had high expectations for this year. Not a team I've thought very highly of. Looking at their schedule going forward, there's a very realistic path to 9-3. Could you imagine, with the team that they have, that they end the season 9-3? That's 1 loss the rest of the way, and that 1 loss would be to Oklahoma and Bedlam. But
they get them at home, right? It's
yeah, we get them in Stillwater. So things looking up for the Cowboys. Shout out Mike Gundy. But yeah, one I'm sneakily watching throughout the year. Their games may not be the headliners at any point, but they've got my attention. I'm enjoying it.
They have circled the wagon. Good job on the Cowboys.
If we're going positive, I'm going to give a shout out to Missouri. It's like it's 2007 again. All of a sudden, this team's relevant. They're 6-1. They've beaten everybody that they're supposed to beat, but the schedule gets pretty harder for them. They play South Carolina, play Georgia, you play Tennessee, and you play Florida and Arkansas. All the teams that could beat you, but if you get through that, you represent the East. If you lose to Georgia, you're what? They're in the East, right?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, which is kind of weird that Missouri's all the way in the East.
Yeah, just an add up.
Whatever. But yeah, if you don't, if let's say you lose to Georgia, do you make a bowl game? Not bowl games. Do you make the playoffs potentially as a 1-loss team? If you make it close against Georgia, or you'd be 2-loss team then, huh?
2-loss team. I think you're eliminated just by that, but
yeah,
your 2 losses are LSU and Georgia. So you might be a top 10 team.
Beating that team, you should have beat that team probably.
I know, bugs me.
Keep it up, Missouri.
Any last positive words or parting shots? All right,
Do you have negative ones, Brad?
I've got no more. I've got.
Oh, okay. I thought you were like positive because I'm ready to start.
No.
Negative.
We're going positive this week. It's a change of pace for us. Well, not something that we're gonna do a whole lot because we like to dunk on people as much as everyone else. Check out our Twitter. But with that, we're gonna wrap up the podcast. That's been it for the Week 7 review, recap, whatever you want to call it. Make sure to follow us on our socials. Give us a like or a subscribe or a repost or whatever you're on for this, and give us a 5-star review if you're on a podcasting platform. Appreciate you spending time with us. We'll catch you on the next one for our Week 8 preview. Peace.